Biel will be introduced. There are two things that will happen before that. First, I'm going to share some tips for getting the most out of participating by Zoom. And second, a member of our team will share some connections between tonight's theme and the lens through which we look, that we at Our Lord's Lutheran look at our call to be caretakers of creation. So first, the tips. Anna Foppe, my co-host, has muted everyone or will mute everyone. During the breakout room time and the Q&A, you want to unmute your microphone, and so your cursor being at the bottom left of your screen will allow you to do that. So you'll just click on the icon and you'll either have a red line showing muted or it will disappear and you're unmuted. On that same Zoom screen, more toward the center of that ribbon, there's other functions, particularly the chat button that could be helpful. If you don't want to ask questions aloud, you can type your questions in during the Q&A. If you're on a computer, simply hit enter after typing in your comment and that will enter it. But for those who are on an iPhone, you actually have to press send. So you first locate and click on the three dots in the bottom right-hand corner. You select chat, then you type in chat and press send. And then you select close in the top left-hand corner to return to the video. Android phones are very similar. If you're on a mobile device, though, you can only see the person talking at a particular time or else the shared screen if the screen is being shared. Mobile device users don't have multiple view functions. The top right corner of your screen is how you toggle between speaker view and gallery view if you're on a computer. Tonight, our speakers have slides, and I will be sharing those with you via screen share. So that will fill your screen. Anna will highlight our speakers when screen share is not on, but when we have breakout rooms, put yourself on gallery view so you can see everyone in your small group at once. And I will give instructions for those groups after the presentations. Depending on your software, if you're on a computer, the switches to screen share and breakout rooms may cause your viewing screen to disappear suddenly. It becomes hidden on the hidden windows on your desktop. So go to the icon that gets you to your desktop and then select the screen that either has the people in this gathering or the slides on it. You don't want to click the Zoom post attendee box accidentally if you have to do that. Otherwise, you'll have to re-enter the meeting. Now, I turn you over to Dave Gokin, a member of the speaker series team, to give us a connection to a faithful foundation for tonight's topic.
Okay, I'm gonna read this. Carol came up with it, but she's a little under the weather. So it comes from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America social statement. It says, as Lutherans, we foster faith that is active in love, a love that seeks justice and an insight that strives to discern what is right, good, and fitting. We join with others to remove obstacles of discrimination and indifference that prevent people from living out their desired lives. We seek to identify the intersection of racial equity related to the environment, health, housing, hunger, and immigration. Our speakers tonight are Brianna Chandler and Virginia Woulfe Biel. Brianna is a native St. Louisan, and during her high school years became interested and involved in a variety of social justice causes. She is a member of Washington University's class of 2023. Currently, Brianna is very involved in Sunrise St. Louis, a local chapter of the national youth-led climate justice organization. Brianna cares deeply for her community and is always looking for ways to get involved. Virginia is the Three Rivers coordinator for the Piasaw Palisades group of the Sierra Club in Alton, Illinois. The Sierra Club's mission is to fight for safe and healthy communities. In her work, she collaborates with local nonprofit and faith-based organizations on local air and water quality issues that impact BIPOC and frontline communities in the Metro East. Virginia's anti-racism journey includes the Gamaliel Network's week-long organizing training, serving on Alton's YWCA Racial Justice Committee, completing the YWCA sponsored Witnessing Whiteness, a deep dive to better understand the impacts of white privilege in our society. She is currently working with the Illinois Sierra Club chapter on producing and presenting anti-racism trainings for statewide staff and volunteers. I'll interject a personal note here to embarrass her. I hired her because I was a supervisor at that point, a volunteer supervisor hiring a paid staff. So I've known her for a long time. We've done some interesting work together. And so with that, we'll start with Brianna. Brianna, take it away. Thank you.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here. The presentation is going to get queued up soon. But yes, we'll get started in a minute here. Oh, there we go. Okay, wonderful. So just started off with the title slide. Let's talk about environmental justice. Next slide, please. Oh, so you're going to click the arrow. Yes. So it's important to do land acknowledgements because when we look at the overall history of the United States violently took the land that we're currently on from Indigenous people. It's especially important to talk about Indigenous people when we're talking about environmental justice because they were the original stewards of this land and they know how to best protect this land. So both our Lord's Lutheran Church and WashU, where I go to college, are on Sioux, Miami, Osage, and Kickapoo land. And while it's important to acknowledge whose land we're on, it's also important to understand that ultimately we must figure out a way to return the land to Indigenous people. Next slide, please. So a little bit about me. As Dave said, I'm a sophomore at Washington University in St. Louis. Right now, I'm double majoring in American Culture Studies and Drama. I don't really call myself an activist. I just feel like it's somewhat of an overused and kind of deified term, right? I don't necessarily want to put myself on a pedestal with that label because at the end of the day, any kind of community organizing work, it's a collective effort. And my parents always put a really big emphasis on political education and community service. And that's what really got me into doing everything that I do. In terms of education, I went to a Catholic school in St. Louis called St. Roch, and then I went to a Catholic high school called Narings Hall. Both of these environments were PWIs, predominantly white institutions. And that very much shaped the way in which I perceived racial justice. And both schools put a really big emphasis on community service as well. And I did appreciate having a Christian learning environment that did really emphasize the importance of equity, even though it wasn't, always perfect, and no institution or school is perfect. And so in terms of like the work that I do, I mainly focus on the Black Lives Matter movement and climate justice. And something I always say, and something that lots of people always say, is that racial justice is ultimately climate justice, and climate justice is ultimately racial justice. And due to the pandemic, most of the work that I do takes place over social media to try to impact change on a larger scale. Next slide, please. So nationally, Sunrise is a youth-led movement to stop climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. That's kind of the catchphrase. The ultimate goal is to pass a Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is a resolution that was introduced to Congress in 2019. It's a framework, though, not an actual policy, so it's still being written, and it's going to be written by members of Congress. And it lays out the steps of addressing climate change. Unlike other legislation, the Green New Deal is bold because it aims to address the climate crisis on a scale that science tells us that we need to avert its worst impacts. Next slide, please. So at the local level, Sunrise St. Louis's mission statement is, "We will stand in solidarity with BIPOC organizers and actively support their organizing. We will continue to educate ourselves and center Black and Indigenous liberation. We will work to model a Green New Deal in our community by organizing to address problems in St. Louis." So prior to the pandemic and all the uprisings around racial justice and police brutality this summer, we didn't really have a specific mission statement, and we were focused a lot on electoral work. And while electoral work is important, we realized that we needed to be kind of in St. Louis, not just like we needed to be connected to St. Louis, not necessarily just in St. Louis. And it was really important for us to do that because while I'm a Black organizer with Sunrise, the hub is mainly white, and it's full of a lot of WashU students who aren't from St. Louis and didn't necessarily understand kind of like the city's complex history with racial justice. So we really wanted to put something into words that kind of solidified a direction for us in terms of how we were really investing into the community. And in terms of just all organizing work, it's important to educate yourselves about the people who are most marginalized in our society. That would definitely be Black and Indigenous people. And we included the last line, "work to model a Green New Deal in our community," because we realized that it would probably take a lot of effort to necessarily like come up with some Green New Deal for St. Louis. But we can definitely work to model the values of the Green New Deal in our everyday organizing. Next slide, please.
Brianna,
Yeah.
we have some old folks here, me, and I just recently found out what BIPOC stood for. So could you enlighten all of us just in case we're missing out on that?
Yes, thank you. Black and Indigenous people of color. Yes, and feel free to like stop me anytime. If people have questions, I'm a fast talker. I've always been, and I'm working on it. So yes, thank you for that reminder. Next slide, please. Yes, so a little bit of background on the Green New Deal. So the goal is to reach 100% renewable energy by 2030. Achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions, create millions of good paying jobs in the process, and ensure a just transition for all workers. And a just transition is a really key part of the Green New Deal. And specifically when we're talking about workers, we know that coal workers are very essential to the way that the United States works now, and a lot of people rely on the fossil fuel industry for jobs. So we don't want to take those jobs away when we take away fossil fuels. We want to transfer those jobs into the clean energy field. Next slide, please. Yes, so more on a just transition. Everything that you see on the screen: guarantee a job with a livable wage for all, provide all with high quality health care and adequate housing, ensure access to clean air, water, and food. Like I was saying before, this massive transition away from fossil fuels has to be just. And a key part of doing this is also ensuring the health and well-being of marginalized people, especially BIPOC, poor, disabled people, etc. Kind of really all the people that our current system is leaving behind. Next slide, please. However, it's important to note that the Green New Deal will not solve all of our environmental problems because a lot of these problems are largely systemic and very historical and very complex. The same systems that exploit both planet and people the same systems exploit both planet and people. These systems depend on exploitation to function. We cannot deal with climate change without also dealing with the exploitation of humans. So most everyone except the wealthy few in power are exploited in some way by these oppressive systems. But Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people in the global South, disabled, the poor, and also women have been and continue to be harmed disproportionately in severity, duration. We all know that there's been a massive uprising this summer around police brutality against Black people, against not only the racial policing in our country, but the racism that is at the core of everything in this country. And in the past, Sunrises, both nationally and at the local level, it's really just been centered around electoral work around the Green New Deal. But we can't work towards a Green New Deal or even a better future when there are people in our movement being left behind. Next slide, please. So that's why it's also really important to learn about the Red Deal, and both at the national and local level, Sunrise endorses the Red Deal. So the Red Deal is a response to the Green New Deal that focuses on climate change solutions that extend beyond the colonial state. It was authored by a large group of Indigenous organizers. The Red Deal is a movement-oriented document for climate justice and grassroots reform and revolution. Its creation was spearheaded by the Red Nation, which, as I said before, is a coalition of Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizers advocating for Indigenous liberation. The Red Nation organized a series of gatherings for other groups and individuals to draft the Red Deal together as a document that goes beyond region or nation. The Red Deal is not counter to the Green New Deal, but a call for action beyond the Green New Deal. It prioritizes Indigenous liberation, but also a revolutionary left position. Indigenous liberation is ultimately liberation for everyone. And the Red Deal has 4 core principles. So the first is, what creates crisis cannot solve it. So it's important to divest from these institutions that harm both people and the planet, for example, the fossil fuel industry. And we must radically reevaluate where our resources are going. And a really important quote from the document that I like is that we draw from a Black abolitionist tradition to call for divestment away from harmful systems. Imagine if the US military had to hold a bake sale to keep its doors open instead of our children's schools, domestic violence shelters, and language programs, and other very helpful social programs. The next point is change from below and to the left. So change from below focuses on people power, and people power is the most direct form of democracy, and that's how we make change. And another really important quote from this document says that you can't expect the powerful and the wealthy to give up their wealth and power out of the kindness of their hearts, right? It's going to take a lot of people power to really get the rights and benefits that we need in order to have an equitable society. So actually focusing on building up strong communities and galvanizing their support. Then through this people support, politicians will follow. And that's the leverage, people and communities. And so that kind of takes us to the third point. Politicians can't do what only mass movements do. So this section is about the Red Deal's position as a revolutionary movement of the people, not necessarily reformist, asking politicians for a gradual change. The US system was designed to oppress and exclude certain people. While progress has been made, it still does that. The system does not work in the best interest of the people, and a politician can be as kind-hearted as they want, but at the end of the day, the system is designed the way that it's designed. And the last piece is from theory to action. So in the past, there have been a lot of grassroots movements against the fossil fuel industry, police violence, racist immigration policies, and labor exploitation. Yet nothing has really coalesced into a large, unified mass movement. And one thing I really like about this is that it talks about not just fighting against something, but fighting for something, right? Even at a psychological level, focusing on the positive is ultimately more galvanizing than focusing on the negative, right? So kind of changing it from, I want to take down the fossil fuel industry or take down the big companies that are exploiting the earth, really thinking about it as I want to fight for a better future for my children. And the Red New Deal says, moving on to a different point, that it's important to make policy recommendations that can be used at any level of government, from the grassroots tribal council to the state, because change has to be accessible to all communities and all levels of government. And they also make a really good point about non-reformist reforms, really making sure that when we're asking or demanding change, that it targets the root cause of a problem, not just the symptoms. Next slide, please. And so this is just a reflection I included. I'm a Christian myself, and I think that faith can be so grounding when you're really engaging with social justice and organizing in your community. And so I really like this passage. But ask the beasts, and they will teach you, the birds of the heavens, and they will tell you, or the bushes of the earth, and they will teach you, or the fish of the sea, and they will declare to you. Who among all those does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hands is the life of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. So really just, it focuses on, I feel, kind of looking towards nature for inspiration, looking towards nature for how we should all live in community with each other. So that's what I have for you all this evening, and I'll open it up to questions.
Okay, I think we're just going to have Virginia make her presentation, Brianna, and then we'll go to the breakout sessions, and then we'll come back at the end for the questions and answers.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, Anna, can you bring Virginia in?
Sure. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up my presentation, which is right here. Let's see. Well, I certainly had this up. Let's see. Not it. Yeah, just give me 1 second. Should be so much easier than this. Here we go. Okay. There's always a little bit of something that kind of gets in the way. So thank you, Brianna. That was awesome. And that is the first I heard of the Red Deal. Very exciting. So very cool. Thank you all for inviting me this evening. And again, Dave's an old friend and colleague, and was great working with him in the Sierra Club when he was on the XCOM all those years. But he invited me to speak tonight about environmentalism and equity, and really in the context as we care for God's creation. So that has really grounded a lot of my work with the Sierra Club. So I work for a local group in Alton, the Piasaw Palisades group of the Sierra Club. And we actually, our project, we're one of the few groups that have paid staff. Normally that's more of a state level type thing. And just for some background, the Sierra Club is a national, one of the oldest environmental organizations. You know, we've been learning that it is rooted in a lot of racism, and we're really trying to, to recognize that and move beyond that. So that is a big part of our work. And I'm really feel honored to be a part of that work. So along with Christine Favila and myself, again, I'm Virginia Woulfe Biel, we're the Three Rivers Projects coordinators. And a lot of our work is coalition work. And one of the biggest partners that I work with is the United Congregations of the Metro East. And let me tell you, their organizing is wonderful. They build power to make a difference. And, their motto is, we count our success in wins on their campaigns. And they are a faith-based organization. There's 5 clusters in the Metro East, and I've worked with all 5 clusters in different capacities. But in 2014, the United Congregations made a big investment in me, and invited me to participate in their week-long organizers training. And this actually happened the day after Michael Brown was murdered in Ferguson. And it was also the first year that the Gamaliel Network, and so United Congregations of the Metro East is an affiliate of the Gamaliel Network of Illinois and Iowa. So this was the first year that they were really grounding their week-long organizers training around racism, white privilege. So it was a life-changing experience for me. It wasn't the beginning of my anti-racism journey, but it was certainly one of the most profound portions of it. I've been working with UCM since then, and even before then in a lot of the organizing. Our missions align in a lot of ways. So we're really focused on building power together. And here's some of the issues that we've cut and worked on together. And most of these, not that they, my project works primarily on local and state issues. We don't work on a lot of federal legislation, and we're education and advocacy. So the Clean Energy Jobs Act, and I was so glad Brianna, brought up the Green New Deal, because really the Clean Energy Jobs Act is Illinois' Green New Deal, because it is rooted in that just transition. So that's so important, something that it's the only energy bill that even addresses that. Of course, most energy bills come from corporations, and so they're not real interested in that just transition piece. Also, the Illinois Fair Tax to, take the tax burden off the middle class and the poor, and have the rich pay their fair share of the taxes in Illinois. Equitable broadband access that has really come to light in this double, this era of the COVID crisis, along with the anti-racism movement. It is just so relevant, and there's so many people that do not have access, and we need that access for our task of daily living, for our jobs, for our schooling, to communicate with loved ones. So that's another thing that we find that is so important, to get equity in that access. There was a local issue in Osage, the Viola incinerator air permit. Unfortunately, this is one we lost, but we fought hard for. These are the frontline communities that Brianna was talking about a lot, the BIPOC communities that disproportionately suffer the effects of, environmental pollution. So when Trump rolled back some of the air quality regulations, Veolia incinerator immediately, even though they had just been issued an air permit, immediately asked for a new permit under the lower standards. And we gave them a good fight. Sometimes you don't win, but it's not the last they've heard from us either. So we can't let these frontline communities continue to be plagued by disproportionate pollution. So another thing that we're really passionate about is pretrial detention. And a lot of times you'll hear this about to get rid of cash bail, because what this, this is really incarcerating people before they have even been convicted of a crime. They may be held because they can't raise cash bail until they get their day in court. And as we know, sometimes that takes a long time. And of course, again, this is impacting disproportionately poor people and the BIPOC population. So that's another thing that hopefully we're addressing. We can bring justice to that issue. Also, getting out the vote, integrated voter engagement. We know that we need to get people in these offices that share our values. And it's very important, and we're at a very critical time. I know it's on most people's mind with this upcoming election, but every election, whether it's a local consolidated election for your mayor or I'm a village trustee in Godfrey. It's like from the school board to the president of the United States, our elected officials they need to share our values. So getting out the vote and getting access to voting, which, voting fraud is a myth. Voting suppression is a reality. So that's something that's so important. Just another thing that we're doing together that I think's very important, and I'll drop the link into the chat later, but UCM and Sierra Club are hosting a weekly Madison County and also St. Clair County COVID response Zoom. Now I'm moderating the Madison County one. I live in Madison County, and it's on at 3 o'clock on Thursdays, and it's the same link for the St. Clair County one. But we get our members of, our members of Congress, our senators and representatives. We get the public health administrators on. We get the school administrators, and we frame this weekly conversation. We've had it since the second week of the lockdown of the COVID crisis. So it's been an ongoing for 6 months now, and we're holding these elected officials and administrators accountable for how we're imagining public safety, getting out information during this time of crisis. We're not afraid to ask them why there's not enough testing or why certain areas, are not getting the Chromebooks for the school district. There's so many questions. There's so much inequity that this COVID pandemic has brought to light, and it needs to be addressed. So I'm going to move on because I got on my soapbox a little bit, sorry. So in the Sierra Club, our organizing is really around the Jemez principles. And this is something that we've been working on, I know, for the last 10 years. And the Jemez principles came about in the mid 1990s. And it really addresses how early environmentalism was very much white privilege, white savior, white people going onto the reservation, into the frontline communities of color, and having their own agenda and not working in community with the communities. And you can see here, it's saying, you've got to be inclusive, and the bottom up organizing is working with those grassroots that are there in those communities. Letting people speak for themselves, not going in and assuming we know the answers. That work in solidarity and mutuality. We really just want it better for everyone, and working on the just relationships is so important. You have to get to know people to understand their needs and their wants and how they want to move forward on any sort of campaign or issue that you're working together on. And then I think that the commitment to self-transformation has been something that I've taken very seriously. And a lot of my colleagues, especially, being a person that enjoys the privileges that I do just for the fact that I'm a white person. So like I had mentioned earlier, it's a journey that we're on. It's one that'll never end, but that we have to keep moving forward on. So that's been a positive in the Sierra Club. Like I said, the Sierra Club has had its problems in the past, and I am proud that they're working on making it a more of a just organization. So back to my little project, we really, we work around our 4 pillars, and you can read them here. I'm not going to read them out loud because I'm going to go through them real quick. So protecting the big rivers. So we're the Three Rivers Project. So the Mississippi, the Missouri, and the Illinois rivers were in the confluence area. A lot of the river issues we work on are navigation related with barge traffic and how they don't pay their way. That's really on the taxpayers' back and trying to right that wrong. And then of course, conservation around a lot of the gray infrastructure on the river. The locks and dams, the river training structures. My colleague, Christine Favila, is really the expert on this, but also conservation, as I said, and river management to keep, make our drinking water clean and safe for people, and the fish that we fish from the river safe to eat. It's a huge, the Mississippi River is a huge flyway for migrating birds, and that's another thing that, we do care about. So another one of our pillars is protecting wetlands and open space. And this is kind of where I fit in more. This is more my thing with the project. So that the middle photo is actually a project that we do up in Paramarquette State Park in the upper camps that were built in by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s and 40s. So these have been falling into disrepair, and for the last 8 years, we've been getting volunteers, raising the money and going up there and repairing the structures so that they can be used by the public to get people out into the outdoors to enjoy nature. The picture on the left is a really cool Alton Middle School project. We've created an outdoor classroom with them, working with the Alton School Board, and gotten grants. The kids really get involved. So that's kind of the fun part of what I get to do. Building vibrant communities. We just had our Mississippi Earth Tones Festival, and that is really celebrating the river through art, music, and conservation. It was a virtual festival this year. Normally it's a street festival that we have about 2,000 people attend every year in Alton. We did virtual scavenger hunt. It was a big hit. So we figured out, we've been working from home since March, and then it'll be March until we get back into the office or are able to have, face-to-face meetings. So we're really having to reinvent ourselves, find our relevance in this virtual world. So that was one thing. We also at one time helped open a little organic grocery store in a food desert in Alton. Unfortunately, it has closed, but it was a great experiment. And then of course we work with the Alton YWCA on their child enrichment program, and that's awesome. That is them doing a butterfly puddle in their little garden. So, and then another big issue is our new energy future. That goes back to the Green New Deal and the Clean Energy Jobs Act in Illinois. It's a big push. We're hoping to get that through veto session in November. It's going to be a tough one because the legislature has not been meeting, but we're really going to try our hardest, because if we wait until the next legislator, it's kind of starting from scratch. So yeah, and these are just photos of some of the rallies that we've had, some of the volunteers that we've gotten involved. And then another thing that I work on personally is the solar group buys in Illinois. This is the 5th one that the Sierra Club has helped sponsor. And we've been able to, plug in, I'm not sure where our megawatts are right now, but we've greatly expanded access to solar in Madison, St. Clair, and Monroe, Jersey County, Calhoun County. So we're really proud of that. So, when I spoke with Dave, he said he was looking for some actions that possibly you might want to take. So Another thing that we're working on, we got the coal ash rule passed in 2018, and they are now at the, I work a lot on just transitioning coal communities, which Alton, East Alton, Wood River is a transitioning community. So coal ash is a big problem. So we're doing public comment as part of the rulemaking section, section. You know, we can talk offline about that. Clean Energy Jobs Act, there's some information here on how you can take some action by tweeting or getting onto a town hall. And then we're having the Mississippi River Earth Tones river cleanup on Saturday. All these links I can drop into the chat later. And then another thing is the statewide action for reclaiming our pre-trial freedom. That's happening Saturday. And then there's information too on our community conversations around COVID, our weekly Zooms. So thanks, I appreciate you having me. And I guess we're gonna go to breakout rooms. So I will stop sharing my screen and send it back over to Pastor Kratzer.
Thank you, Virginia.
Okay. I'm going to assign you into groups of 4. Let's see, so, or boxes of 4, so to speak. I know that several of you have more than one person present. Our speakers will also be within these rooms, and there was going to be 5 minutes. And what I want you to talk about after quickly introducing yourself by name is simply share one thing you heard tonight that is new to you, something that you didn't know at all before, okay? There we go. And you do need to click that yes, you accept going into a room, okay? Here we go.